Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review, we are looking at the Marvel Legends 12-inch Deadpool figure from Hasbro. And I know what many of you are thinking, oh my gosh, another Deadpool. And then another batch of you are thinking, oh my gosh, another Deadpool. And then another batch is thinking, he didn't like the 12-inch Spider-Man figure, it wasn't very good. Will this Deadpool figure be any better? And should I even consider it? Given that NECA put out an 18-inch Deadpool that was just fantastic. Well, we're going to answer all of those questions and talk about some of those issues as we go. So let's go ahead and get this guy off the stand and take a closer look. This guy stands almost exactly 12 inches, which makes him 30.5 centimeters. So he is almost spot on, slightly short for 12 inches, but they pretty much bingo did. So right about 12 inches, which is pretty cool if you're a 12-inch figure collector, a 1/6 scale collector. That would put him at just about exactly 6 feet, just shy, which, although he probably should be a little taller, I guess, if you're worried about scale, but it's good enough. It's close enough, especially for a Hasbro figure. No big deal, size is fine. So there are a few things I want to mention before we get into the accessories and into the real details of the figure. Mostly, this guy is better than Spider-Man. He does have a few issues that Spider-Man had, and we'll talk about that. And he does have definitely some of his own issues, but there are some good things about this figure, and we're going to talk about that first. The first of which is that the paint that is there is clean. You can see the black lines throughout the torso. Very well done. It's all sculpted for the upper body. You can see the seam work around his chest there. That's all very well done, so I'm happy about that. It's nice and clean. It looks good. One thing that bugs me a little bit, though, is that the seam work that you see on the chest, it is not carried over onto the bicep, and it's not carried over down onto the legs. That is just lazy and cheap. There is not really an excuse for that. Come on, Hasbro. Let's go. Let's put a little bit of effort into these things. You have it halfway here, and then the other half is just, we'll just reuse parts and paint it. Well, that makes it stand out as being worse. Either just paint the whole thing or mold some molds. Make some new molds for us. Come on. That's not cool. It's acceptable, though, so we'll move on from that. There's no shading on any of the red or any of the black, so that's a bit of a bummer. I'll point that out right now. There is shading throughout the straps and the holsters and the harnesses, whatever you want to call them. Those have a nice, I guess it almost looks like it's in the plastic, but I'm not sure if it is or if it's just a weird type of wash that kind of soaks into the plastic or what. But it looks pretty good. I think that's okay. I'll point out that they painted most of the buckles. They didn't paint any of the ones on the pouches, but they did do the stuff on the chest harness, which is cool. They did the one on the thigh harness, which is cool, and they painted the buckles on the feet. So most of them are painted, probably enough to look okay. It would definitely have looked way better to have that same silver carried around through all of these other buckles, which are so very obviously on the front of the figure. The belt is painted well enough. The belt buckle, it's okay. The knife sheaths are not painted at all. Nice sculpt, really nice sculpt for those, but no paint on those. A little bit of a bummer. The eyes are painted in silver, which, well, it's actually like a pearly white, to be honest, which isn't terrible. It's not the best situation. I don't personally get why they go with the silver or the pearly white. I think just a nice clean white would look really good. A nice bright white would look much, much better than silver. I don't get why they do that, because a glossy white definitely has a more accurate look if they're going for something like that anyway. So I don't really get it. It's not terrible. This looks like it might be the exact same head that we recently got, just scaled up, which it's very boxy. It's not my favorite look for Deadpool at all. It doesn't look right. It looks weird, especially on this body. Let me pull the camera back so you can see. It's not the biggest deal because it's kind of par for the course for Legends, but his head is especially large, at least tall maybe not too wide, but it's very tall for his body. Doesn't quite have that superhero or supervillain proportion. Looking at the back of him, we have this nice sword scabbard, which is nicely detailed. You see stitch marks and everything, but, and I cannot get over this, it's such a rookie mistake. They put the swords on wrong, and they are keyed into these scabbards. You have to put them in that particular way. Okay, so the argument could be these swords don't have that much of a curve, so it's okay. But even then, you draw your sword like this. So if he was a real person and he reached up and grabbed his sword, which he can almost do, so we'll get to the articulation, that's cool. If he's going to draw his sword, his arm goes out like this, okay? The way the swords are, you would have to draw the sword curling that way. That's impossible. Swords do not go that way. People like to argue with me in the comments. They should curl in. No, they always curve out. The sharper the curve, the more it needs to be out. But even if it's a straight sword, you still draw it this way so the blade is in your hand facing the right direction. If it's like this, you cannot draw the sword effectively. You'd be holding it backwards. And they put it that way, and then they made it so that you have to put the swords in the scabbard that way. I know that sounds like a little thing to some people, but that's the kind of thing that should not be overlooked by one of the biggest toy companies in the world. They had to make this sculpt specifically for this figure, and then they made it backwards. That's not okay. That is not okay. It's not cool. All right, let's get into the accessories. I've covered everything on the figure. Oh, wait, the accessories don't include these two guns. I'll start with that. We have these guns that are separate molds for the handles and the trigger guard, for the grips and the trigger guard here and here. These pistols are not accessories. They are permanently made into those holsters. Also not acceptable. That is not okay. Not okay. Okay, so on to the real accessories. We have the two swords, which you already saw. They're nicely sculpted, nicely detailed enough. They are not traditional katanas. I don't know. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen an official Deadpool not have actual katanas. These kind of just stamped swords, I've never seen that. I've used them in customs, but I'm limited in what I can do there or not. So I don't know. You guys can let me know. That's not a deal breaker, but it's something I noticed. Is that okay? Is that not? You guys can let me know that. We also have the two knives. One that fits on his chest, which is pretty cool. And the knives are okay. They're all of the silver for the sculpted, like the swords or the knives. It's pretty dull. Doesn't look great, but it is there. The knives are sculpted very nicely with the little tactical handles. That's pretty cool. I don't mind those. I like the knives, the one on the back and the one on the chest. Very well done. Okay, then we also have two other weapons which look like Fisher-Price toys. We have the pistol. It doesn't have any paint other than the black, and it's made out of hollow plastic. So it's like two shells put together. Very cheap feeling, very cheap looking. Then we have the one that's more of like a space rifle, also very cheap and cheap feeling and cheap looking, but it does have the Deadpool logo on it, so I guess that's okay. We have a burrito, which is nicely done because the foil is actually a separate piece of plastic, so that looks really good. The burrito part that's painted, not painted very well. It looks kind of like spaghetti sauce with cheese on it. It doesn't look very good. The taco they made for the 6-inch Deadpool is actually much better detailed, surprisingly. We do have an interchangeable head, which is very well done. It's a separate piece of plastic, again, for the red, so there's no paint issue at all, and it actually does have that appeal or that look of being a separate layer of cloth on top of his skin. And then his skin has that same kind of marbly plastic like the holsters, so that's really well done. The teeth are painted fairly well, and the eye is painted fairly well. So if you're okay with the overall shape of the head, which it's not very good, but you can look past it, it's a really nice alternate head. I am very happy with that. We still don't have any real shading on the red, but it looks really nice otherwise. So that's a great alternate head. Then we have Headpool, which has his own little flight stand, and he's really well done. The helmet has some really nice detail in it. The skull does, the mask does. It's not really a face. It's all very well done, and the jaw has a hinge on it, and the propeller can spin. So I love that accessory. It's very, very good. You're probably wondering if it can fit on the figure. That's a good question. I didn't think of that until right now, so we're going to try it for the first time together. It looks like it has the same size peg. It should fit. I don't know if you're going to really want to do that, but yeah, you don't want to do that. It does not look good. It sits way too high and looks weird. But it's an option, I guess, if you want to do that. So that's pretty cool. Let's try interchanging the heads, actually, to see how well they fit. Because sometimes you have these ball pegs that are just way too tight for some of the heads that they give you. It takes a little bit of force, but it does fit nicely. Does it sit too high? No, I don't think so. I think the neck is probably too long, but it sits well on the neck, so that's a good thing. So we do have some interchangeable hands, and we have the two fist hands. We have two gun gripping hands. We have one secondary hand for like the forward grip of a gun. Then we have a thumbs up hand. So definitely some options. He has a nice batch of accessories. It's just that the guns they gave us as accessories are really cheap and crappy, and the guns that are in his holsters are not accessories. So that's pretty disappointing. Now, as far as the figure goes, we do have this harness, which is a separate piece, and it's a little bit cumbersome, and it always wants to sit at kind of an angle. I don't know if you guys can see this. I think you can. The buckle is off to the side, and it never wants to go back to where it belongs. I guess it's possible that they tried to do that on purpose, but it's just not cool. You can unsnap it and take the harness off if you want to, if you just want a naked Deadpool, that's totally up to you. What you do with your figures as in your private time is totally up to you. I would suggest leaving it on, though. All right, so now as far as the articulation goes, the head does have that hinge. You guys saw that while I was putting it on. So he can look up pretty well. Not too bad. I'll take that. He can look down a little bit, look side to side, no problem. He can lean his head, not so much. Butterfly joint on this guy works really well. You can bring it pretty far forward, pretty far back, and it's all pretty seamless, so that's a good thing. We have a ball hinge for the shoulder, which allows him to bring his arm up horizontally, so that's pretty good. No complaints there. We can, of course, rotate that arm all the way around. So the shoulders are good. We have our bicep swivel, that's good. Double jointed elbow, of course, that's going to be fine. For the wrists, these are separate pieces that just kind of spin around there. Then the wrists have a swivel and a hinge, as you would expect. One thing I have to point out while we're at this part of his body, his chest is exceedingly narrow. His pecs are actually narrower than his ribs, which is not at all indicative of a superhero, so that is not okay. And then his biceps are incredibly skinny. I don't know what's going on with these figures, but his bicep is smaller than his wrist. No human in the history of humans has that. That is not the case no matter what. So that is not okay again. As far as the articulation, back to that, we have our diaphragm joint in the upper torso, which it does lean back, actually quite a bit. Of course, it did use some down here. We'll get to that. It leans back quite a bit. The whole harness and holsters, they just kind of poof up though, so that's a little bit of a bummer. It does lean forward a little bit, not so much. Does it lean side to side? A little bit. Not so much. It's pretty good though. I mean, it's not bad for a diaphragm joint. I'll take it. And it does rotate around, so that's pretty good. It's just really stiff when you rotate it. We have our ab crunch down here, which he leans forward one notch, which isn't too bad. And he leans back an extra notch, so that's okay. But here's the thing, without a waist swivel, you can never have him lean over to the side at all. All you can do is have him lean forward and then rotate, which is not really what a human would do unless he's doing calisthenics. So it's a little bit weird. Like I said with Spider-Man, you need to, if you're going to have just these two pieces of articulation, you have to switch them. You have to put the diaphragm joint down here and then the ab crunch at the top. And that way he can turn and lean to the side or crouch or bend over, whatever you want to do. Having this combination, you're very much more limited in what you can do, and it's not good. For the hips, we can bring the legs all the way forward and even way farther than normal. So that is surprisingly good. So that's awesome. The hips go really far forward. Do they go back at all? Just the tiniest little bit. How about going out to the side? Yeah, still not so much. They still haven't figured out how to just make these rounder. All they have to do is set the peg higher in the hip. So you see, can you guys see that? Yeah, you can see the peg in there. It comes out down here, and then you have like a 1/4 of an inch of material up there. So that when you actually rotate around that peg, it just smacks into the crotch. Whereas if this peg was higher up, or if the peg was where it was, but it was higher up in the leg, it'd be farther out and you'd be able to move the leg no problem. Don't understand why they haven't figured that out yet. We do have thigh swivels, so that's good, no problem there. Double jointed knees, of course, they're gonna work no problem. We have a shin swivel, so for those of you that like those, we have it, but it's incredibly ugly, so you probably don't want to use it too much. We have floating straps down here, which will hide the ankle joint pretty well. For the hinge for the ankles, we get pretty good range. It goes pretty far forward, pretty far back, and I like that the ankle actually fits into the foot. It doesn't look like he's wearing Crocs, so that's good. And you do have your Marvel Legends ankle rocker, but watch what happens when I turn that ankle rocker. It's almost pegged completely vertically, so the ankle rocker is useless unless you use that hinge and then cut that shin swivel. And then you get a really nice ankle rocker, but totally destroys the sculpt. So poorly executed for the ankles. So ultimately, it's better than Spider-Man. It comes with more stuff. It has some better features, but ultimately it has a lot of the same problems and some other problems like the swords going on backwards or no paint anywhere on the figure other than the black paneling, or the guns that don't come out of the holsters, or the guns that look like Fisher-Price toys, or the ankles that don't work, or the chest that's too narrow. I mean, it's just riddled with problems, and honestly, unless you're a huge Deadpool fan or you just want to buy every one of the 12-inch Marvel Legends, it's not worth the $50. I wouldn't spend it. I think you're not going to be happy with it. The posability is just going to be so limited, and there's no like fun factor to it because it all looks very cheap and just not very collector-y. It's just like a big Marvel Legends figure, which unfortunately the bigger you make a Marvel Legends figure, the more obvious the problems are. So I have to say I don't really recommend it. Just spend the extra $50 and get the NECA Deadpool, which blows this one out of the water by far. Yes, it's double the price, but it's another 6 inches taller, comes with better accessories and far more detail in paint and articulation. So you want to go that route, guys. That's my recommendation. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. And make sure you turn on notifications if you want to see more. And then in the meantime, keep collecting.